Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Where am I? I'm in the Crown Pavilion. Yes, the new patch is live, Festival of the Four Winds. I'm going to talk to you guys about exactly what is included in this patch, and it's a fair amount, I would say. Different certainly from last year when two of these key festivals were interior, and I think there's a reasonable amount to talk about. Sadly, I did not get early access once again for this patch because I spent the time when I could have been in early access instead producing a video about how I got stat cap today. Wow, yes, I'm so excited. So that will be going up pretty soon, but for today, let's talk about the Festival of the Four Winds. Scarlet Briar's attack devastated Lion's Arch, but Tyria's best and brightest are rallying to support the stricken city. The Zephyrhites and Queen Jenna will both offer their finest festival amusements to boost morale and offer support. Visit the Labyrinthine Cliffs and experience the rush of aspect movement skills, take part in Sanctum Sprint, or enjoy one of the brand new events. Then take a hot air balloon to Divinity's Reach and enjoy the reopened Crown Pavilion, including a new version of the Queen's Gauntlet, the Boss Blitz. Join Bram, Rox, Marjorie, Casimir, Timey and Scruffy as they enjoy the festivities and usher in the return of Lion's Arch services. So, this patch actually includes a fair amount of change to Lion's Arch, as well as the returning area of the Labyrinthine Cliffs and the Crown Pavilion. These were two areas from last year. If you're just coming into Gw2, if maybe you took a break last year, you'll find plenty of new stuff to do here. But even if you experienced that stuff before, there are still changes to be had, and Lion's Arch in itself is pretty interesting. I did do a full tour, ran around absolutely everywhere I can, and indeed the city has come back as a service hub. I made a prediction, number one, that the Zephyrite Sanctum wouldn't return, which it did, and I also made a prediction that Lion's Arch wouldn't be rebuilt this year. Does this technically count as it being rebuilt? I guess ArenaNet didn't like the idea of the services forever remaining in Vigil Keep. I always like the idea of Lion's Arch being destroyed and players being spread out to all the cities in the world. Apparently they don't see that so much, maybe they don't see a need for it, particularly with mega servers, maybe it's not necessary. But they did something rather clever when they returned services to Lion's Arch. Instead of just gating them all into the central area as they all were before, they're now in several mini hubs. So for example, you've got a hub with a bank and a trading post, what most people really care about, around the PvP portals. Then you have another area with a bunch of crafting stuff, but also a bank and a trading post. And a third area with the Mystic Forge, and again a bank and a trading post. What this means is there are several of these little locations around Lion's Arch that people will congregate to. And no longer is there this ridiculous, huge, lag-inducing area in the center of the city, and people are, in general, encouraged to spread out, which was always one of the greatest crimes of Lion's Arch at launch. It was this big, beautiful city you'd experience just once, maybe twice for map completion, and then you just spend your entire time around the Mystic Forge. So, I like what they've done with Lion's Arch. I still sort of stand by my statement that the city will not be rebuilt this year. Yes, the theme of the patch is that the Zephyrhites have returned in order to offer Lion's Arch assistance, but I think they do have to wait a lot longer with these ruined areas to let people really sink in that something bad happened. If they repair it too quickly, it's going to discredit what the Living Story supposedly stands for, that the world can actually adapt and change. Even when Lion's Arch is rebuilt, if it's rebuilt in a new configuration, it will kind of feel cheap, the idea of it being destroyed in the first place. I want to see it wait a long time before all these massive wrecks are removed from the area, before all of the houses and so forth are touched up, but we'll see how it goes. As it stands, there have been a few geographical changes in Lion's Arch. There's a new rope bridge, for example, connecting two of the previously distant areas of the map, and there's a few new ramps and environmental changes around all of these new mini-hubs they've got set up. As for NPCs that don't offer you services, like lore NPCs, what is everyone saying now that they're back in Lion's Arch? There are nowhere near as many characters as there once were. Some of the key characters like Kanak, I actually can't find in Lion's Arch. I presume he may still be at the Vigil Keep, but I haven't gone to check. And many of the miscellaneous NPCs have no dialogue for us at all. Then there are a few, such as the city NPCs, that give you that movement skill buff. Some of those have something interesting to say, but nothing too amazing. You might have expected that all those mini caves they added to Lion's Arch back when it was getting attacked and you could find lost heirlooms in them, maybe there'd be some Easter egg and they would have added a character to one, but despite my best efforts looking in them, I couldn't find anything. The Gw2, one of the other hotspots, one of the things you might be interested in, has no activity there at all. You can't see any Tengu. There's a single NPC that says the Tengu are talking in some alien bird language and won't allow anybody to get particularly close. Hardly any story, and there's been no developments. Over at the Zephyrite Sanctum, you'll find, sadly, that not too much has changed. You may remember from last year that there were dynamic events that would spawn in this map, this sort of half-town, half-explorable area map. Those events are still there, and there have been a couple of new ones added. I believe this is new, at least, including a very interesting one where you race from the bottom of the labyrinthine cliffs to the top of the Sanctum as a Dolyak, and it's called the Flying Dolyak Race. Very funny, and it feels a lot like, say, a Guild Rush would. You're not actually racing against other players, you're sort of all trying to get to the top as quickly as you can. The more Dolyaks you get through, the better your reward is. Aside from that, there are a couple of new NPCs. Obviously, Ellen Keel and Evan Nashblade aren't there anymore. They can be found in Lion's Arch. Instead, you find Timey over at the Labyrinthine Cliffs. She was very interested in seeing how the Zephyrite deal with their aspects of magic. I mean, there's not too much lore going on. They are a little bit more open this year about the fact that the Zephyrites are the successors to the Brotherhood of the Dragon, the previous dwarves that looked after Glint, but no huge lore bombshells. It doesn't quite have the excitement it did last year, and really no developments. The story sort of suggests that they were in Cantha for a while. I was hoping there'd be some big elaboration here. Maybe there would be a little bit of story about what's going on in Cantha. Instead, we just seem to have some decorations. There is a new Jadeite statue somewhere that presumably the Zephyrites bought from someone in Cantha and has now been transported here. Interesting thing about that, in theory, according to lore, the Jade Sea has melted, and yet we still got some jade here, perhaps some that were separated from the main body of the sea, never melted when the harvest winds were reversed. But anyway, you know, there's evidence that they've been to Cantha, and no real story to go with it. It really does seem, sadly to me, that they just picked it because, hey, China release, and, you know, the players over there will kind of enjoy the aesthetic. Perhaps. That's maybe a pessimistic view, but I couldn't find anything incredible. Service-wise, yes, the merchants have returned that will take overabundant items out of the economy, such as, like, jute scraps and so forth. It's not going to have such a big impact this year as it did last year, but one of the main new things you'll be interested to see is a vendor exchanging blade shards. These were the items you had loads of from the Attack on Lion's Arch stuff, and now you can trade those away. Some people were expecting to be, you know, reasonably well compensated for these. It turns out you don't get very much at all. You get a bunch of greens and maybe a shot at a rare, maybe a very, very, very low shot at an exotic. For all of my blade shards, which was almost a bank tab's worth, I got maybe 40 greens and 3 rares or something like that. Really, not too amazing, and you may actually consider holding on to those blade shards in case you ever want to make more spinal blade backpacks. Do remember the only other way to get those now is from running Twilight Arbor Aether Path, and that is no walk in the park. Do remember that there were 2 mini games added with the Sanctum last year. One of them, I've got to admit, I never even played. And that is the Aspect Arena and the Sanctum Sprint. Sanctum Sprint I loved. Aspect Arena I had very little experience of, and so this year I intend to really dig deep with it. However, at the time of me recording this, sigils are bugged in there, and sigils will proc when they're not meant to, and it sort of breaks the arena. ArenaNet did make a statement they'd be doing a hotfix to address this, and hopefully when they do that, they'll realize that all of their activities have been bugged since the feature patch to include the use of sigils and runes. For example, South Sun Survival is just totally balked at the moment, completely and utterly ruined. You can run, say, Runes of the Dolyak in there to counter an enormous amount of hunger that would usually inflict you with health degeneration, and you can run stuff like Sigil of Hydromancy to 2-shot your opponents in totally unfair ways. The Aspect Arena is not unique in this sigil bug, and hopefully they don't just fix that, they fix all of them at once, because it's needed it for a while. Moving over to the Crown Pavilion, some interesting stuff has changed. Now let me be clear, before this patch came out, there were a lot of people that were expecting this to be another huge farm patch, just as it was last time the Crown Pavilion came up, that would drop the price of tier 6 mats really low. Some people even predicting as low as 10 silver. I have been a little bit reserved on this assumption because I believe most of the reason those tier 6 mats went so low last year was because not only was the Crown Pavilion added, but Invasions was shortly added just after that, Frostgorge was introduced at the same time, the Queensdale Champ Farm was introduced at the same time, as was the incredibly broken Ember Farm. All of these things contributed to the drop of tier 6 materials, and just the Crown Pavilion returning, I don't think would have done that much. Turns out, even regardless, ArenaNet have changed the mechanics of the pavilion quite substantially. Before, you would literally just run around zerging down bosses as they spawned. Now it's changed to be something more in line with the way they did the Lion's Arch finale events, escorting NPCs out of the town. It's zerg content, but you need a bit of organization to do it, and I'm a little disappointed in the community right now. Most of it it has been a backlash. Most of it has been players who expected to get loads of cheap tier 6 mats and all this farm, who are now disappointed they can't smash their head against their keyboard for ages for lots of money. The way they've designed it now is you have to pay Hobotron an upfront cost of gold before the bosses even spawn. This immediately gates players from constantly farming and takes gold out of the economy as it spawns, but further, you are not rewarded champ bags or any generic loot in the entire area anymore. It's completely different. The only way you can get loot is by donating to Hobotron, spawning the mobs, and killing all 6 bosses as quickly as possible. If you get all 6 dead within the first 10 minutes or so, I believe it is, you'll get the gold reward. If you miss that, you'll get silver. If you miss that, then you'll get bronze, and then I believe you've just got as much time as you want to actually finally kill them. The thing here is, obviously, mobs scale in Guild Wars 2, and they don't scale linearly. If you get a massive Zerg on a champion, it gets substantially more difficult, and so players are being encouraged to split up. Not just split up, but play into very specific mechanics about each boss. You should see in footage in the background. I try and fight the Ogre legendary mob, with just me and a friend of mine on a staff Ellie. I cast a lava font on him, and it turns out he's got all these pets around him with retaliation on them, and it instantly downs me. There are mechanics to play into. I was fighting the Fire Shaman for a long time, and you can actually reflect a lot of the damage he does. So I'm actually not disappointed with this. I think what they're trying to do here is encourage large-scale, coordinated efforts to complete the content. The Lion's Arch stuff was very rewarding once you finally learned how to do it, once you had a coordinated group that were actually escorting NPCs. And sure, there were issues with the implementation, but the general idea, I think, is very solid. It's Zergy content, but it takes coordination and actual challenge. You have to split your whole Zerg across 6 smaller groups that can actually deal with each boss as quick as possible. Personally, I'm very excited to be running this with my guild, and we'll see how well we can do. It's more of that kind of difficult content you can do on a large scale, and hopefully actually be rewarded for it. I don't know what the gold rewards are like right now, but in premise, I like what's happened with the Pavilion. I'm not as bitter as most people are. Another small change with the Pavilion is up with the 1v1 arenas. All of the achievements for doing the arenas above have returned, so if you got them last year, you still have them unlocked, but you will get another achievement for beating Liadri again this year. Liadri is, in my opinion, substantially easier this year because they have added their new AoE tails, the giant orange ones, to her big attacks. This means it's much easier to see when you're going to get hit, instead of last year where you had to look for a very thin red circle on a metal grating that would be particularly difficult to see. Already, YouTube is filling up with videos of people killing her in their own way. One guy was talking about an interesting new option that's opened up since last year where you can kill her using just lifesteal, and you never actually have to strip her invulnerability, and that's really interesting to me. I haven't played it just yet, but it sounds cool, and I'm glad we get awarded once again. Beyond that, let's move on to some other stuff. A big update to champion farms in general. Last time the Crown Pavilion was here, they added, basically, the even notion of a champ farm was added to the game. A bunch have now been removed. Okay, this is directly from the patch notes. Many champion events in the starter maps have been converted into veterans. This change is being made to ensure new players focus on learning the core game experience. The following events are affected. You know, I wonder if they are seriously worried players would buy Guild Wars 2, go into Queensdale, find a champ train, and then just do that forevermore and level up as quickly as they can. So this is actually gone now. It did sort of make map chat a bit toxic in those maps, and many people are saying, oh, this is amazing, yay, finally it's gone. I don't know, though. I think if you've got a really active, you know, thriving chat going on in any map, that's better than very little to no chat at all, especially for early level zones. But hey, we'll see. So not only did they nerf the Queensdale one, in anticipation of other ones popping up, they actually nerfed all of them. All the champions in Metrica Province, Caledon Forest, Plains of Ashford, Queensdale, and Wayfarer Foothills have been converted from champion rank into veteran, unless of course it's like a world boss. Do consider, obviously, this isn't the death of champion farms in total. The Frostgorge one is still sort of going on. There is still farm to be had in Ore, and I kind of like that because Ore's been in a weird place where it's not as popular an area as it once was, and I don't really like that. So, again, people are being incentivized to go to those end game areas. Fractal runners hopefully have good news in store. I tend to feel like because people get so good at fractals, whenever ArenaNetics have changed them, they find some small way that Arena has botched that change and then get very angry. But they state, based on the recent collaborative development initiative, we've revisited the Dredge Factory Fractal with intent to improve the overall experience. Too many dredge at high scales cause the play experience of this fractal to suffer, both in terms of length and difficulty. With these two things in mind, mind, we've redesigned a few core encounters in the instance to ease the burden of these symptoms. Namely, on the pressure plates, they have removed scaling spawns. A set number of dredge will now spawn at each key location, regardless of scale. The bomb path, they have again removed scaling spawns. You'd get like some insane Zerg. I kind of liked it for loot before, but that will no longer happen. It will be a set amount of dredge. Also, they introduced a stealth mechanic. All players, regardless of profession, will now be able to acquire stealth to complete the puzzle. Beware the dredge security countermeasures. I'm not sure exactly what those are. I haven't played it yet, but you guys might be aware dredge was like kind of impossible, really difficult and annoying to do without a thief, and then sort of trivial with a thief. And so by doing this, they've sort of removed so much weighting on that one class, which I do in theory agree with. The turret path, again, no more scaling spawns, and also turrets will now fire in set patterns to discourage certain players from progressing further into the facility. I'm not sure what that means. I guess there must have been some kind of skip that they fixed. And finally, Rabsavage. This was the big one, really. Rabsavage at higher scales would just go on and on and on and on. And so they have removed additional spawns as a requirement for completion of the event, so you only have to kill the boss, it sounds like now. They've reduced his health by 15%, and he now appropriately telegraphs his giant shockwave attack. I thought the telegraph on it was okay, but that's huge. That Rabsavage thing actually makes the dredge fractal very bearable, I would say, at high scales, just from my layman's perspective. Not that I've done too many of them. Further for Fractals, one of the most broken things about it for a long time has been you should be getting higher chances at ascended weapon and armor boxes the higher scale you go, and that was broken. That wasn't true. They'd messed it up somehow, and now apparently they have fixed it. Drop rates will now scale better with each Fractal level. Let's hope that's true. And then they fixed a bunch of exploits as well in other Fractals. There have been a bunch of changes to sigils and items. For example, the Ascended Celestial Rings didn't gain their bonus from the feature patch if you infuse them, so now they've increased the stats back up. But one that I really want to point out that I think is a fantastic change, should have been in for a long time ago, Sigil of Fire. This is a very common sigil you see a lot of players use. When this procs on a mob, its size would scale with the size of the mob, so you'd have these insanely huge flame bursts triggering on giant world bosses all the time. It was one of the reasons that one of the many reasons that combat in this game gets so chaotic and stupid. Nobody needs to see that Sigil of Fire just procced on the boss. It's like one of the worst things for an animation that should have a huge tail. And so finally they have increased the culling priority on this sigil's effect. So when you get a huge Zerg of players, it starts to cull visual effects down, and you won't be getting these crazy flashes going on all over the place. There are still a lot of other issues with that in the game, but this has been one of the most prominent for a long time, and finally they got rid of it, so yay! It will no longer scale with monster size. Another big change for anybody out there with the Greatsword Eternity, they did do a cosmetic patch to Eternity a while ago, but apparently they feel that was not enough, and now the weapon is kind of insane. There are new footsteps with the weapon, there is like a new aura effect with the weapon, and the most crazy thing is if you use it as a projectile, so say you're a Mesmer with Eternity, you use Greatsword 2, if you're a Warrior of Eternity, you use Greatsword 4, Guardian, Greatsword 5, these projectiles now have crazy effects. It shows both swords. The swords come out as twins in an X shape, spin around and have these ridiculous, crazy, obnoxious effects, and maybe that's warranted since it basically is the hardest legendary weapon to get in the game. Very cool. If you do have Eternity, I would recommend going and checking it out. Other small things, they changed the way that kill streak boosters work in the game. Before they were useless, they were like, you'd pop it and you'd have 60 seconds to kill a mob, and then it would refresh and you'd have 60 seconds again. Very similar to the old scrolls we used to have. Well, now they've changed it. Once you pop it, it will last an hour, and then every time you kill a mob, you gain 10% more experience on the next kill, and it keeps ticking up for 60 seconds. So it's like you're getting more and more and more kills and ramping up to it, but if you miss that 60-second window, you lose all of your kill streak, but the boon still stays on you. So when you kill your next mob, again, you go up to 10% experience, and then 20, and then 30, and then you lose it back down to 10, and it will end at 100%. So you can end up going on this crazy rampage. It makes the boosts way more useful, and now I'm glad that I didn't get rid of all of them in my bank. There have been some additions to the Black Lion Trading Company. First of all, the new set of Black Lion weapon skins are available. They are Phoenix skins. I think some of them look sort of okay, but maybe not for everyone. That's something I find myself saying about a lot of the new skins they're adding in the Black Lion store. And further, there are even more new faces available in the Total Makeover kits. They do this most updates now, which I'm happy about. One of the new Char one looks pretty cool, and I intend to make a Char Guardian rather soon, so I'm quite happy with that. There is a new Bizarre Quaggan mini pack that's available, and just for a little while on this week only, you can get a cute mini piglet, which is available in the toys category for 400 gems. I want to just finish the video by talking to you guys a little bit about data mine stuff from that shaman. There was a post over on Reddit. It looks like the devs may be adding a new feature to the game called silence, and a text string has been pulled out of the client, which reads, "You have been silenced, you may not talk for X amount of times." This sounds like something that could be quite good. Maybe when reporting people. Shouldn't be open to abuse, obviously, but will be nice to get rid of the gold spammers. Obviously has become a big issue in game recently, and I guess maybe this is their way of saying, look, we can't get rid of them, so we'll just add this feature to make them shut up at the very least. There's something about summoning babies too that sounds like it's coming in the game. Very weird. There's some kind of monkey king tonic. God knows what that's about. Maybe something to do with the jungle when we finally get to it, when Season 2 actually begins. And there are new back pieces as well that have been cited in the game. One of them is called the Chaos of Lissa. If you remember, we had the Grenth and Dwayna back pieces before. It looks like there's going to be a Lissa one now, and I would expect a Melandru one to go with it eventually. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the patch in a nutshell. I'll give you more updates, especially on the Crown Pavilion thing, where how feasible it is with an organised group. I'm very much looking forward to that. And there's a whole new meta, a bunch of stuff to do. I hope you guys enjoyed. What do you think about the Lion's Arch thing? That's what I'm most curious about right now. Do you think this was a good move? I think if they absolutely had to add all the services back, this is the best way they could have done it. I'm really worried now. I'm sort of worried they're just going to start fixing Lion's Arch all too soon. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.